All right, we're at 1:15, so I'll give a very brief intro, and then we'll just give people a moment or two to join, and then we'll get into it. One, thanks for being here. This is one of my favorite presentations to give. It's a lot of fun. I think can have a big impact for folks. I will say that it is very hard for me to present and keep track of the chat. So at the end, there should be plenty of time for like questions, conversation, et cetera. I would love to hear other people's perspective on the work that I'm going to present. And I'll try to kind of skim through the chat afterwards. But again, feel free to kind of ask your questions after that at the end as well. All right, with that, get the presentation going, and we'll get the show on the road. Okay. To share first. So used to having two honors. Spoiled. All right, folks, see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah? All right. All right, so welcome to Becoming the Catalyst, a spark of change to move your team forward. My name is Ray Kriegel. I'm currently the UX director at Omnicell. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite Zen stories. It's about two traveling monks, the senior master and his young apprentice. And along their travels, they encountered just an incredible rainstorm. Just the amount of water that came down was unprecedented for the area. As they came upon a town, this terrible storm had created almost a river running through the center of town. And as they approached this new water feature for this town, there was a wealthy merchant and two of his servants. Now they clearly needed to cross this body of water, but this merchant in his fine clothes was not about to wade through the mud, so he was telling his servants they had to carry him. The only problem was they'd clearly just been shopping, and both servants were kind of loaded down with some very expensive looking packages. So the merchant saying, I'm not going to walk across this. I'll get my fine clothes. Why do you have to carry me? So they go to put the packages down. He said, don't you put those in the mud. You just saw how much we spent on those. Those are worth more than you are. And so they can't put them down. And he's yelling at them to carry them, and their arms are full. And so just a kind of a big mess. And the elder monk kind of walks up to this very unhappy man, scoops him up, and starts carrying him across the water. Now, despite him getting what he wanted, he was a little indignant, like, who are you, you filthy old man? How dare you touch me? Why, when we get to the other side of this, I'm gonna, and on he went, while the monk just calmly carried him across the water, got to the other side, set him down, and continued on. Now, sometime later, they passed through the town. They're traveling on the road. They stop for their modest meal in the evening. And the young apprentice just kind of can't keep it anymore. He goes, Master, I just can't believe how that man treated you. I mean, doesn't he know who you are? This venerable sage, respected throughout the, etc. And the monk holds up a hand and stops him and says, I put that man down hours ago. Why are you still carrying him? We get this way sometimes with our ideas. We can kind of get very attached to them. We hold on to them longer than we need to. And look, it makes a certain amount of sense, right? They're comfortable. They're things we've done in the past that worked. Maybe someone important told us this is how we do it. It feels less risky to do things the way we've always done it. And when we're in that kind of mode, it can sort of feel like you're a hammer surrounded by a bunch of nails. That's a great feeling. Unfortunately, what often happens when we open our eyes, or when we have our eyes open for us, is we realize that the world tends to be a little bit more complex than that. So I think everyone would agree, change is not optional. I like quotes. There's one from Albert Einstein. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So, right, we got to change. We have to evolve. Now, often when we think about change, we're kind of thinking about the exterior, like what are we going to change in the world? We're going to change our tools. We're going to upgrade our tools. We're going to change our process. There's things out there that we're going to change. But before we can do that, we kind of have to start with our interior landscape. So I'm going to talk about 6 things that will help that type of change, which will then help us lead change with our teams and organizations. And these 6 key elements are humility, empathy, ownership, awareness, opportunity, and reflection. Now, I know that can be a lot to remember, so there's the handy acronym HEOR. All right, so it's not really that good an acronym. Anyhow, humility, empathy, ownership, awareness, opportunity, and reflection. Let's start with humility. Before any change is possible, you have to be able to entertain the fact that you could be wrong, and maybe not completely wrong, but at least there might be a better way of working or addressing the problem you're attempting to solve. Ray Dalio calls this radical open-mindedness, and he says it is more important how you deal with what you don't know than what it is that you don't know. So how do you deal with that not knowing? Unfortunately, our brains are not wired that way. It's called confirmation bias. We tend to look for things that support our existing beliefs. It can be hard to find those counterpoints, right? But that's what we need to find. What's really fascinating is the same part of our brain activates when a core belief is challenged as if we're physically threatened. And as an example, Matthew Inman, who creates the comic The Oatmeal, has one where he illustrates this, and he talks about a story of George Washington. So the Smithsonian has some of George Washington's dentures. Already that's a little bit odd, but anyway, one of those dentures, I'm gonna make sure I get this right, is a combination of gold, lead, hippo ivory, and some other random animal teeth. And now you might say, well, that's a little bit odd, but they didn't really have good dentures back in the day, so okay, I can accept that. They also have another set of George Washington's dentures that are made from slaves' teeth. So now, depending on how you feel about the founder of America, if you're a patriotic American, that might be a little bit harder to internalize. Of course, if you're not from America, you might look at that as just part of your confirmation bias that, those Americans are just kind of screwed up. Again, depends on your perspective. But you can think of it also like, in recent years, we've had a lot of celebrities do some really off things, and when that comes out in the news, I know I've had the experience of, oh, I really like that musician, but then they just did that thing that I find really distasteful, and it can be really hard for me to accept sometimes that how do I like their music but then not like this thing that they did. So I'm sure that hopefully many of you had that that explanation, and that is sort of that our brain and that kind of defense mechanism, because our brain wants us to be the hero of our own stories and wants us to think that everything we do is good and therefore kind of justify it. Adam Grant talks about kind of looking at the joy of being wrong. Like, how can we look for things that and get excited that we're wrong, and that shows we're learning. Ben Zander, who with his wife Rosamund Zander wrote the book The Art of Possibility. He's the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic. He would have his students, whenever they made a mistake, they were instructed to jump up, throw their hands in the air, and say, "How fascinating!" Again, it's about this joy of being wrong. If you're wrong, you learn something. Ray Dalio again talks about finding the most believable person who thinks differently than you, who's likely to disagree with you. And he has a very specific definition of believable, where it's someone who has the right kind of skills and experience in that area. So for example, if you ask me a question around user experience, I've been doing this for a quarter of a century. I'm fairly believable when it comes to UX. I've been hanging around the Agile community for a while, and I know a lot of things, say, about mob programming or certain other things, but I'm not really the most believable person on those topics. So I might have ideas, but you really shouldn't listen to me as much as you won't listen to someone else on some of those. I'm a little bit less believable there. Now, it can help if you have the right mindset. So Carol Dweck, in her book of the same name, Mindset, talks about two different possibilities. There's a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And with a fixed mindset, we believe things are the way they are. Nothing is going to change them. So if you succeed, it's because you're awesome. You're just awesome. And if you fail, it's because there's some flaw in you that is defective and you're broken and, well, you failed. But a growth mindset, failure is taken as an opportunity to learn. So we want to kind of work towards having a growth mindset. Now, what's interesting is we're not just one or the other. There can be some areas where we have a growth mindset, but other areas we might have a fixed mindset. But we can start to become, to notice that and work towards having more of a growth mindset. Here's just as an example, I knew someone who worked at Zappos early on in their history. And when they got there, they noticed that there's an affiliate marketing program. If you're not familiar with affiliate marketing, it's where like I might put up an ad for Zappos, and anyone who buys this product through my ad, I get a cut of that revenue. So this person looks at this and goes, wow, we are just giving a ton of money away to these affiliates, but we're growing as a brand. Do we really need these? I don't think we do. So they turned it off, just cut it off. It cost the company $20 million. That's a big mistake. I mean, I don't know. I've never made a $20 million mistake that I know of. So, and I'm hoping most of you haven't either. And I can imagine you might think, well, that sounds like a fireable offense, right? $20 million mistake, you're out. Well, luckily, this person learned from that. And when they relaunched the affiliate program, they launched it as a VIP program. And shortly after that, that program became 50% of Zappos revenue. So take that big failure, learn from it, an incredible growth opportunity. Now for myself, much smaller scale. I remember years ago, this is going back to like 2007, kind of early on in my Agile experience. I went to a workshop given by Jeff Patton on how to, his protocol for kind of kicking off projects. And this is kind of still when the concept of Sprint Zero was kicking around. And so he described this process, which was kind of familiar to me from a UX perspective. But he kept saying it's like this short, quick thing, but it sounded to me like the same kind of, 3, 4, 5 month process that I'd been doing in a lot of agencies up until that point. So at the end, I was finally like, Jeff, this sounds great, but how long does this take? And he said, oh, I do this in about 2 weeks. And I thought, no freaking way. No freaking way you do all this in 2 weeks. And that was my fixed mindset talking. Now that was luckily a Friday. So by the time I get back to work on Monday, my perspective had softened a little bit. My open mindset took over and I started to think, okay, he's clearly highly believable. He's done this before. How can I make this work? So with the startup I was, I started working what might a 2-week agenda look like. I kind of took some of his exercises, swapped them out with some things that I either liked better or was just more familiar with, and came up with what I thought was, oh, actually it's a reasonable 2-week agenda, and experimented with the startup I was with, and it worked really well. Of course, over the years, I've actually refined it down to a 3-day protocol. So there was still a lot of room for improvement, but that's just an example of how even in a short period of time, I was able to move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. So how do you know you might be a little bit fixed and kind of maybe lacking in some of that humility? Look for things that make you uncomfortable. Like if the thought of changing something kind of makes you shrink a little bit, that might be a good candidate for re-examination. Or if you've just been doing the same thing in the same way for a long period of time, maybe it is the best way of doing something, but maybe there's a better alternative. Is there something you just dismiss, like just out of hand? Someone says, this is a good idea. And you go, nope, not even going to listen to that. And of course, the more obvious is when there's open conflict. So that is the easiest to see. The next thing we're going to talk about is empathy. There's a reason people behave the way they do. It's better to understand it first than to try and change someone's mind, right? Empathy is seeing through another person's eyes. So the reason we're doing this work is that we want to get better, not only for ourselves and our team, but to have a beneficial impact on the people we serve. Another story from my history, I was at an enterprise organization. This is, again, probably a good 15 years ago, and they were very early on in an agile transformation to the point where they were doing 1-month sprints and the process felt really heavy. So as part of being on the team, I made a couple what I thought to be simple suggestions on some basic things that they might try to evolve to be faster. And people stared at me like I had 3 heads. And this was a little confusing to me. So I put on my user research hat and started taking people to lunch just to kind of understand where they were coming from and what perspectives they were bringing to these, and maybe might help me understand why I was getting the reaction I was getting. And what I found was the engineers I was working with basically fit into one of two profiles. There were a couple of really senior experienced folks who had come from some just massive waterfall organizations like the Oracles of the world. And to them, what they saw this organization doing with a 1 month sprint and releasing was just blowing their mind. They'd never seen anyone move that fast, and they couldn't imagine getting any better. And then there was this other group of kind of brilliant new hires right out of MIT, and they just wanted to code, and they really just didn't see how process was going to make what they did any better. So once I understood where these folks were coming from with that other group, I had to be able to kind of communicate a vision for how this could get even better and move beyond what they thought was already brilliant. And for the second group, I could talk about how our process would elevate the impact they were going to have and make their work more efficient, reduce rework, all these other things that they cared about. So by having that empathy, understanding them, it made it much easier for me to move that team in a positive, what I felt was a positive direction. So we're doing this, again, not just to level up ourselves, we want to level up the team, right? You know, there's the whole thing, there is no I in team. Well, there is, it's in the a-hole. Don't be the a-hole. All right, so humility, you know, we got to believe that there's a better way of doing things. We have to have empathy for the people we work with and the people we're going to serve. And the next thing we have to do is be willing to take some ownership of the results. So we have to believe that we can make a difference. We have to take some responsibility for what's going to happen. If things don't go well, there's something that we could do or could have done to make it better. So as an example, I think user research is pretty important. You want to understand the people you're going to serve in order to make good product decisions. But if I was working with a team and I'm proposing some user research and they're saying, nope, not going to do it. I mean, I can say, oh, what a bunch of idiots, right? We've been talking about user centricity for decades. Oh, these people just don't get it. Or I can take some responsibility and figure out, well, what's my role in what's going on. Maybe I'm not doing a good enough job connecting the value of what I'm advocating for to the business value. Or maybe what I'm connecting it to isn't as high a priority as some other things. So if I understand that, then I can probably make a better argument, or it might even change my approach. I might advocate for something entirely different. And sometimes I have to step out of my role. Like, we all have kind of the boxes that we're comfortable playing in, but that might not be the most important thing that a team needs. I've certainly spent enough time doing QA testing, especially with startups, when that's what people need. Am I the best at it? No, but sometimes that's just what folks need. I also, because I have a lot of experience facilitating, I tend to step in and help teams run better retrospectives. Again, it's a skill that I have that's adaptable to something a team needs. So it's just a way that I can help. So how we can be of service, what we can take ownership for, if we think about not just the boundaries of our role, sometimes that can lead us to step up in some different ways. And often it feels like just there's lots of conflict, right? Like, if it wasn't for this stakeholder, this other team, we'd be able to do great work, right? We have this sort of red versus blue. And what we sometimes fail to realize is we're on the same team. Like, we're all working together. The enemy is not in here. The enemy is out there. It's our competitors. It's the marketplace. It's the speed of change and technology. So sometimes it can be helpful to figure out, what are the barriers that the people or the person that you feel is in your way, what are the challenges they have? Can you help with that in any way? If you're willing to take ownership of someone else's problem, they will definitely trust you more and probably then be a lot more motivated to help you with yours. So again, you're all trying to get to the same outcome. I often joke, especially around UX, that no customer ever said, this product stinks, but I heard the wireframes were great. Like, we do a great design, it doesn't really matter. It only matters like what makes it to the customer. We're all in this together. We succeed or fail as a team. All right, so we're humble. We believe there's a better way of working. We have empathy for those we work with and those who our products and services will serve. We're willing to take ownership and drive some of this change. And the next level is having some awareness of some possibilities that we could experiment with. So Lean has this notion of goop, right? Get out of the building. And you could take that literally, but I think really what we're talking about is get out of your comfort zone. Expose yourself to some different ideas, whether it's through virtual events like this or podcasts or books. There's lots of different places you can go to learn new and different things. And it doesn't even have to be within the same domain. There might be interesting techniques or ideas in other areas that we might be able to kind of incorporate into our work. So where are the places that you go to for inspiration now? And are there others that maybe you're not tapping into that you could? Then when you find some great ideas, steal them. Most of this, this process stuff, it's not like it's patented, and you often don't need to invent something new. There's often probably something out there that someone else is doing that might be a reasonable experiment to address the problems that you're facing. Find the thing that looks like it'll fit, give it a shot. You might have to customize it a little bit for your specific circumstances, or maybe you combine some things, but that's okay. The important thing is to get to something that works. So we're feeling humble. We know there's a better way of working. We've got empathy for those who our products and services will serve, as well as those we're collaborating with. We're willing to take ownership of making the situation better. We have some awareness of some experiments we could try. And so the next thing is to create the opportunity to try one of these experiments, because timing is everything. As much as people say they like change, they really don't. There's a phenomenal Domino's commercial years ago, and I wish I could find it on YouTube. I've searched and searched and searched, but they were doing some deal. It was like $5 for 3 pizzas, or like 555 or something. And so in the commercial, the delivery guy shows up, and he's pitching the homeowner on this deal, 5 pizzas, any toppings. And the guy's like, oh, so you mean I could have gotten pineapple and mushroom and this? Yeah, $5 each. I mean, I could have gotten this, that. And he's going through all these like weird, esoteric, I shouldn't say weird, that's judgmental. He's going through all these unusual combinations of toppings. And the delivery guy keeps saying, yeah, $5 each. And then his wife walks up behind him and says, but you got 3 pepperoni, didn't you? And he looks deadpan at the camera and says, I feared change. And that's it, is like, we say we want to do things differently, but we're really attached. Like I said in the beginning, we hold on to these ideas and these ways of working that feel comfortable. So it can be really hard to actually want to try things differently. Even if we're willing, other people that we work with might not be. So where might that resistance come from? Who is going to be most threatened if we do something differently? How can you make it easier for them? How can you bring them along and make them feel included? And again, goes back to having empathy. If you understand why they might be resistant, it might help you approach them in a way that might make them feel more comfortable. Now, some language that a coach I worked with years ago used, I thought was really great, because he talked about everything as an experiment. It wasn't really a change. It wasn't like, okay, show up at 8 a.m. on Monday for your Scrum indoctrination. I mean, training. It was like, well, let's try it. We'll try this experiment. And if it works, we'll do more of it. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. And that made it a lot easier for people to kind of be willing to try it, even if they were feeling a little bit reluctant. So think about, how can you prepare others who might not be as bought in? How can you address their concerns? Sometimes it can even be better if it's someone else's idea. There's a great quote: it's amazing what you can accomplish when it doesn't matter who gets the credit. And I'll give you an example of something years ago. I was at a conference and I first got exposed to the concept of mob programming. And I thought, oh, this is fascinating. I bet our engineering team would be really into this. But I'm the UX guy. Am I really the right person to bring the concept of mob programming to the engineering team? I mean, maybe, but I'm also not that believable in that domain. So I was having lunch with one of the lead engineers, and he was just someone who loved trying new things. So I talked to him and I said, hey, I just heard this great thing. I had this conversation with people. They're telling me about mob programming, blah, blah, blah. And I explained what I understood. He got really excited. He looked into it more, and then he brought it to the team. I didn't tell him to. I mean, he just got genuinely excited and brought it to the team. And of course, he's one of the lead engineers, highly believable. And they were really excited to try it. So it was far more effective coming from him than coming from me. So again, if you don't care about it being your idea and getting the recognition for it, that might open up some avenues to let someone else be the advocate for you. when you're thinking about behavior change, there's a great model from BJ Fogg. The behavior is motivation, ability, and trigger. So there has to be some motivation why you want to do something different. You have to have the ability to do it. And lastly, there has to be that trigger to remind you of the new behavior. Now, often, if our organization wants something new, they give us the training, right? Or you go to an event like this and you hear the new thing, and you've got the motivation to change, either because your boss is telling you to, or you're really excited about this new thing, and you've been to the session, you've got the training, you've got the ability, then life seems to go back to normal. You kind of get back into your normal growth, sometimes kind of missing that trigger. So this is where timing can come in. Timing can help with that because there are different ways, things that'll make people more open to change, and that will help you create the trigger to try the new thing. One of these things, there's a name for these, they're called temporal landmarks. So for example, you might say, we're going to try something new next sprint, or next quarter, or after the vacation, or just Monday. If you're going to try something new, our brains tend to react a little bit more strongly when it's going to happen immediately. Like, we're going to do it tomorrow, like right away. I'm not ready for that. If we say we're going to do it in a month, it gives people some time to adjust, or kind of finish things out. So thinking about, are there good temporal landmarks to introduce a change? Other things that I found that can be good times to introduce change is maybe a new project. Like, let's try it differently on this project. Or if you're new to your role, you've just been hired, or you moved into a new role, you might have some political capital to spend, or some trust that you can use as the new person. So the political capital, if you've earned trust from the team, you might be able to kind of spend that by making a suggestion. And the last two are the more dangerous ones, where if a team is stuck, or worse, there's an existential crisis, they're good opportunities. There's a startup I was with, and there's a couple of these things kind of all came together at once. There was a product owner in a new role, and they hadn't really played a product role before, and they were being given a responsibility for a new initiative, and they seemed a little nervous about it. So I went to them and I said, do you have a plan for how to kick this off? And they said, no, I don't. I said, I do. Would you like me to do this for you? Yes, I would. So there was a gap there, and that person was a little stuck, and I was able to step in and help out. Now, on the existential crisis one, this one was a little more fun. I say definitely fun, tongue in cheek. I was in an online gaming company, and at the time, online poker was, I should say, our biggest market was France. And in France, online poker was in what's called a gray market. So a white market is regulated. There's laws and rules around things. A black market, you're probably familiar, that's when things are illegal. A gray market is, we don't have anything that says it's legal, but we don't have anything that says it's illegal either. So it's kind of existing in this uncertain, undefined space. That's a gray market. Well, the French government looked at all this money moving around and said, we want to tax that. We want the tax revenue from that. Great, regulate the market. We certainly welcome that. As part of that regulation, though, they said, you know what? We consider anyone operating in the market now to be operating illegally. So if you want a license when the market opens, you're going to have to purge your entire membership database and start recruiting from scratch. It's a pretty scary prospect, especially for poker. It's one thing with certain casino games, say blackjack or roulette, where it's really just you against the algorithm, and you can play by yourself. Poker requires other people. So if I want to play a game for $5 and someone else wants to play a game for $50, we're not sitting at the same table. So you need enough people where you can quickly find a game that you want to play. So scrapping your entire membership database is really scary, because who are those first people that are going to sign up and they're going to come in? There's going to be no one there. We were one of the smaller players in the market. So the government was also putting some very onerous restrictions on creating accounts. And my hypothesis was that our old players would come back to us and they would see all these new requirements of what they had to do to create an account that they'd never had to do before. They go, I don't want to do this. That sounds like a lot of work. And they wouldn't read why you had to do it. They would go to one of our bigger competitors. And once they were there, they would see the same things. But are they going to leave the bigger competitor and come back to us? They go, well, while I'm here, I guess I have to do this. I might as well complete my account. So I said, I think we're going to, this is an existential crisis. I think we're going to lose a lot of players if we don't get this right. And it's a bit of a dark pattern, but it was kind of like playing into like fear, like, oh no, if we don't do this right. Or in other words, if we're wrong, we're screwed. And it's great. Fear can be a great motivator. It's a bit of an anti-pattern, but so use it wisely. But certainly on the UX side, we tend to think about making the world a better place, right? If we do this, we do a good job, we make life better for the people we're trying to serve. Kind of risk is the opposite of that. And while the psychology tells us that there really isn't a difference in humans' motivation between avoiding pain and seeking gain, I don't know, my personal experience, obviously I'm biased, does seem to feel that people are more risk averse than sort of seeking gain, at least when it comes to product development. So fear is there. So we're humble. We believe there's a better way of working. We've got empathy for those we're working with and the people we're trying to serve. We're willing to take ownership of making it better. We have some awareness of some experiments we could try. We think we know how to time and structure an opportunity to make it more likely to be successful. And the last thing, of course, is to reflect on how well that worked. And I really spent a lot of time on that. We're at an Agile conference, like the concept of retrospective. There's a lot of stuff out there. So, there's lots of ways you can pick to retrospect. So those are my six concepts that I wanted to hit on. Now, I joked in the beginning, the terrible HEO-hour acronym, right? The first time I gave this talk, I had someone come up to me afterwards who had a military background, and she said, oh, it made perfect sense to her, because when she saw it, she saw high Earth orbit and area of responsibility. And I thought, oh, that's perfect. High Earth orbit, right? We want to step out of our normal perspective and take a broader view of things. Kind of made me think of the story of like the Blue Marble photo, the first photos of Earth from space, right? I think before the 60s, we hadn't seen what the Earth looked like from space. And when NASA kind of finally sent back pictures, it had a profound effect on people, seeing the Earth as this kind of the small blue marble floating in the kind of the vastness of black space, and had an impact on the environmental movement. So being able to zoom out and take that bigger perspective can have a dramatic effect. And then area of responsibility, as I said, sometimes we have to step out of our role and out of our current mindset in some ways to have this kind of effect on our team. So if you need any help remembering about humility, empathy, ownership, awareness, opportunity, and reflection, you can also think about stepping back into a high Earth orbit and examining your area of responsibility. Now, also to help with this, there is a canvas, because why not, right? You need a canvas. And I just kind of put this together as a way to help people explore kind of these different areas. And there's not really a right way to go through it. You don't have to go through it in order. I mean, I find often even sometimes innovation starts with an awareness. Like I go to a talk, I hear someone who does something differently, and I think, oh my gosh, that would be really helpful. It awakens that humility that we could be doing something better than the way we're doing. And I have empathy for the team. Like this would be great for this group of people. And I'm willing to take some ownership and drive it. So now I can think about how I want to structure an opportunity and how well did I do at that? Or did it work for us as a team? So it doesn't have to necessarily go through the order that I laid out there. So if you want, you can go to this link, msm.works/catalyst. There's a link there on where you can download that canvas if you want to play with it a bit yourself. All right. So with that, I'd like to end with a quote from George Box: all models are wrong, but some are useful. So I hope there's some stuff in here that you found useful. And I would love to just kind of open it up and just see what people think. Have you seen any of these come into play in your work? you see anything differently? Disagree with me in certain areas, or do you think there's something critical that I'm missing here? So again, I invite you to either raise your hand if we want to be orderly about it, or unmute yourself and welcome some discussion. We've got some time. Any thoughts? Anyone? Questions? Comments? Well, we've got a room full of smart people here.
I have to say one of the standout points and something that you said that really just hit me was, what is my role in the current situation and what's going on? Like, I really have to think about this, with our deployments, or if we're writing user stories, like, what is my role in this ceremony? What is my role in this meeting that we're about to have? What is my role in this problem that we're trying to solve? Like, that just really stuck out. And I loved the behavior equals motivation, ability, and trigger. So those were my two biggest takeaways. It's just absolutely true. And you're right, timing is everything. And I truly believe that everything happens for a reason. So something is happening at this moment, at this time, for a very big reason. So don't ignore it. Take control of it, take ownership of it, see what's happening, reflect, all the things that you said. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel. It's funny, it reminds me, so my team and I, we just went through training on crucial conversations. If you haven't read the book, I highly recommend it. And one of the elements of that model is they talk about your path to action, which is that there's something that you observe, and then there's a story you tell yourself, and that leads to an emotional response, which then drives your action. And it usually happens so fast that we're not aware of it. And I think, and maybe just my own ego, when I first had gone through that content, I found that model really interesting, but I mostly thought about it from the perspective of, well, great, this will help me understand other people and why they're doing the things that they're doing. And that's certainly true. But what they really emphasized when we went through this training is that you got to start with understanding your own story. Like, what's the story I'm telling myself about this scenario? What reaction am I having that's driving my response? Because the same scenario could drive very different responses. I love the example of if I called someone or someone called me and they said, hey, I'm running late, I'm going to be half an hour behind. How do I react to that? Now, if we're going to go see a show or something that's time bound, I might be really upset. You're going to make me late and we're going to miss the start of a movie, show, whatever. I might be really unhappy about that. In another scenario, like I'm 20 pages from the end of a really awesome book, I might go, you're going to be late? Yay, I get to finish the book, right? Same content, but the story that goes behind it can dramatically change how we respond to it. And I think the same can also be true when we're working in teams. When something happens and we react to it, why are we reacting the way we are? And what story are we telling ourselves? And it doesn't mean, like, story doesn't mean it's untrue, but it just means that what we are telling ourselves is driving our emotions, which then drives our behaviors. So thank you, Rachel, for reminding me of that. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments, disagreements, variations?
Yeah, I really did enjoy this conversation. I came in slightly a little late, but one thing that really stuck out to me is, even in the midst of, like, when it comes to like timing, when it comes to how we present change naturally, I think you said within the conversation, people generally don't like change. So I think it's a great thing to point out as well, but how you maneuver that and giving people time to adjust to it. So even when you were explaining sometimes, hey, we'll start this change in the beginning of the sprint or in the beginning of a new quarter. I recently created this opportunity for our team to work out, to try it in the quarter, but I came to the agreement with my fellow members of our core team that, hey, you know what, it's possibly something we should just try in the beginning of the quarter, give them time to ease into it, to understand it. And the buy-in was a lot better from the team once we gave them that ability to kind of adjust to what's coming, and to also give them time to realize, hey, we have that time, we're going to start it off now, and we'll give ourselves this quarter to now analyze it, inspect it, adapt to it, or get rid of it. So I really enjoyed this conversation and the points you brought up. So
well, thank you for that very specific example. I'm glad that this resonated with you. I think I neglected to mention the book that comes from. I think it was either Dan Pink or the Heath brothers, Chip or Dan Heath. Maybe someone can look up on Amazon for me and post it in chat. It's called When. I think it's like the science of time, but the book is When. Again, I think it was Heath brother. I don't need to. I don't need to share my screen anymore while we're chatting. So yeah, maybe there's a lot of stuff in chat. I missed that. So yeah, maybe someone can look that up for me. There was a hand up, Kimberly.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, my mute was acting crazy. I just wanted to add, I've been on many projects over the years, and one of the things that I know really helps with change, whether it's a new application or whatever it is going out, is the communication, to do regular communication. And of course, a lot of the things you said, listening to people and what their concerns are. But I think, when you have lots of regular communications and it comes from the right individual, whoever that sponsor is of that change, that wants the change or needs the change, that really helps, to come from the right person, and to also let people know, what the benefits are, because a lot of people want to know what's in it for me. So when you do that, they think, oh, okay, this is actually positive for me. So, this isn't bad. So I think if you could always find that makes it easier for people to accept it.
Yeah, there's a great rhyme. I'll make it gender neutral. They that are convinced against their will are of their own opinion still. Right? Like, if you can force people to do things, but if they're not really bought in, you're not getting their full energy and enthusiasm, and you haven't really changed their mind. So yeah, the more you can frame it in ways that make sense and that they see as beneficial, yeah, it makes it more likely that you'll get people at least to disagree and commit if they don't completely agree. So there's a question in the chat: where are there more benefits of having change impact from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top? It's an interesting one. I think sometimes the challenge of coming top down is it can feel forced, and people aren't really bought in. So if you are a leader and you're trying to enforce change, it can be really challenging. You want to make sure you're bringing people along, you're inviting them to experiment with you, and you're tying it back to not only how it benefits them as individuals and teams, but that you're tying it to the mutual purpose that you share as an organization, how it's going to benefit the people that you serve. I often think change is great coming from bottom up, because at the bottom, you're closer to the work. You're probably closer to the customer. You probably recognize what needs to change, but it can also be hampered by what's going on at the top. So, I think that standard example, you want to plan more iteratively, and your company's telling you you have to do quarterly planning. There's going to be some conflict there. So how do you do that ground up change while still dealing with what's being handed down to you from on high? That's not easy either. So there's benefits and struggles with both. What else do folks have? Experiences, perspectives? Heather.
Let me see if I can unmute. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of bring up a thing. I don't know how many of you have experience doing, like team working agreements. But that has helped me, because we do just like a jam board or something like that. And what are the things that you value most about, working together, like working on a team, and then everyone kind of puts their little sticky. And then as you're working together with that team, I like to bring up those things that they valued and like kind of bring that into like, oh, you guys love solving problems, right? Like, so, you know, just like bringing their perspectives along, as well as, you know, kind of helps to make a team gel more, especially, and makes them, you know, want to be more agile and flexible and bring their own thoughts to the table, which is always great for team building. I don't know, just making a comment here, but I'm gonna have to watch this if it's recorded because I missed probably the first half of it. And I think what I'm hearing now is like amazing and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. I think it's going to be recorded, but if not, I do have an older recording of this talk on my
Okay.
website, which also the msm.works is a shortcut that'll get you there. There's a media section and you scroll down. I think there's an old one from Agile Media.
Awesome. Very cool. Thanks.
I think, you know, one thing you're mentioning around, I love working agreements. I think they're really powerful. It ties into one of my principles around making the implicit explicit or making the invisible visible. It can be hard to talk about change if you don't know where you are. So at least when you start having that working agreements conversation, you're saying, well, this is what we believe. And you might reveal some conflict there. It's better to reveal that earlier so a team can work through it than reveal it later because you've hit a wall, or you know that those different expectations are now butting up against each other in a heated sort of way. So I think, yeah, these things that can where you can explore these things earlier and prevent those conflicts later, that can be really helpful. So there's another comment. I gave an example of helping a team stuck, but stepping into and doing someone's role versus sharing a plan and having them step into it. Was there backfire on the perception of that person's ability? So I think this is around, and Arlise, let me know if I'm getting this right, when I offered to do the kickoff for a product manager. Thank you. Yes. Okay. In this case, there was no negative connotation for them. Again, I think we're all in this together. If you've got a healthy organization, there's, you know, to use the sort of the racy language, there's responsible and accountable. I think there's a lot that product is accountable for, but doesn't mean they have to be responsible for it. Someone else can do the work. What's important is the work gets done. And hopefully in a healthy organization, you're looking at the outcome, not the tasks or the artifacts that individuals produce. But are you getting to a good place? So in this case, people were really happy with where we got to. And so, yeah, you know, there was no blowback at all. They were thrilled because now she had a project that was well set up for success, and they didn't care that she wasn't the one that facilitated it. Yes, healthy organization is a key term. And again, back to our area of responsibility, we all have some power to improve the health of our organization. We can't do everything, but we probably have at least some area of control. There's our area of control, which is small for some of us, might be larger for some others in more leadership positions. We have an area of influence that might be a little bit bigger, and then there's things that are outside of that. So when you're thinking about change, like, what are the things that you can control? Great, you have the biggest impact there. Where can I have some influence? You might not be able to get the result you want right away, but you might be able to work that influence over time. And then just recognizing what side of that, you know, it's like what the serenity prayer, change the things that you can, accept the things you can't, and have the wisdom to know the difference. Some things are just out of our control. And Bruce Lee said, be like water, right? I used to joke as a consultant, like, if I was going to bang my head against the wall, it's nice to at least change the wall occasionally. And that's kind of how I looked at consulting at different projects. I think Bruce Lee's got a much better approach though. It's like, be like water. You know, if you're running into an obstacle, flow somewhere else. Flow somewhere where it's going to be easier, where you can actually have an impact instead of just, yes, the water will eventually wear down the wall. But is that the fight you want to have? Maybe it is. Maybe it's a fight worth having, but maybe there's somewhere else that you can look at where you can have impact. What else are people thinking? Love hearing people's reactions. This is fantastic. You can raise your hand, you can send a message to chat, or just unmute yourself and speak up. Oh, thank you, Arlise. I will look to add more quotes. I have a whole, I love quotes. So other people tend to express things better than I do. So I like grabbing them. I'll try to put those in the deck in the future. Anyone? All right. Well, I'm happy to hold the space in case anyone else wants to chat or ask questions or be here. If not, yes, feel free to go and do your thing, some food, take a bio break, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.